Hello.
Warcraft, a name that inevitably paints a picture in your mind. Your thoughts drift back to epic adventures in the vast world of Azeroth with your friends and comrades, or random idiots. Maybe you're reminiscing about the tale of Arthas' decline from a holy paladin to the depraved Lich King. If you're a bit younger, you might also be thinking of fun nights of card games in Hearthstone, learning about the world and characters that make Azeroth and Warcraft itself so special. Or you're a goo goo gaga baby and associate Warcraft with whatever the hell this shit is supposed to be. Whatever your answer, it sure as shit wasn't Warcraft 1, Orcs and Humans, because nobody played that thing, and those few senior gamers that did probably can't even remember. So how about we take a little trip back in time and see for ourselves just how good or bad the first entry of one of the greatest media franchises of all time really was. Ooh, this is gonna be something. Welcome to the Backlog Project, where we play through a gigantic backlog of games and you get to choose which one will be covered next. Just head down to the description of the video to take part in our weekly poll and pick your favorite. Despite spawning such a massive game world, the story of Warcraft is rather basic high fantasy stuff. The humans live in the peaceful world of Azeroth that someday gets invaded by the Orcish army, flooding from their dying homeworld through the dark portal that was opened by the mage Medivh. The Orcs, trying to find a new place to live in, come into conflict with the humans over the land, and war ensues. The story is mostly told in little briefings before each mission that roughly tell you what you have to do and why. Both the Orc and Human campaign are self-contained narratives with their own endings that mostly contradict one another. But with only 1 or 2 paragraphs between each of the 24 missions, you're not really getting any meaningful insight on characters or lore. It's mostly just throwing names around for the purpose of giving you a bit of context on your army's actions. Those names, however, are some you will recognize if you're familiar with later games of the franchise. Blackhand, Medivh, or King Lane of Stormwind make their first appearance here, and even though it's not an impressive story in itself, it did build the foundation for the expansive lore and world the later games build upon. Blizzard Entertainment, the studio behind Warcraft, has often attributed their focus on making their games heavily stylized, instead of focusing on photorealism, to the first Warcraft game that was envisioned to be a more humorous and comic-y take on the Warhammer franchise. While the graphics are certainly dated, the personality still shines through those rough pixels. Forests, swamps, rivers, and plains fit together perfectly in forming a distinct look for the world. Where human structures look like your typical medieval towns, Orc buildings are very primitive, built with scoured resources and adorned by tribal paint and bones. The units also ooze the trademark Warcraft charm the series would later be known for, with Orcish peons leisurely striding to do their work one-handedly and wolf riders having that signature bop in their running animation that you can still see on wolf mounts in World of Warcraft today. I do think that the game could have done with a bit more visual variety though. No matter the mission, you always play in the same few maps with changed layouts, the same looking trees, rocks, and bridges. It can get a bit dull when being told you're going to a new location only for it to look exactly like the last one. I gotta say I'm a bit conflicted about the music in Warcraft 1. Gregory Alper created a meaty soundtrack that does well in portraying the conflict between two warring factions by using the sound of war drums, deep horns, and nothing else really. Some of the human side tracks have a few higher sounds in there, but overall the soundtrack just feels very limited in scope, and while the groundwork is well done and fits the theme, it never goes beyond that and stays a one-trick pony throughout the whole experience. Be real with me, did you notice that I have already switched through almost 10 different tracks in the background? Yeah, I didn't think so. An interesting feature of Warcraft is that all of the game is voiced. Not just the cutscenes and mission briefings are fully narrated, the units and gameplay also go beyond their usual sound effects and talk when you interact with them. A funny little idea that would become a staple in future Warcraft games, repeatedly clicking on the same character will eventually make them use funny voice lines like this.
Stop poking me!
Bill Roper, the guy who voiced the whole game all by himself, did an amazing job in making the two races come to life and give them their legendary quirks. I would have liked the different units to have their own sounds and voice lines. Hearing the same 3 or 4 sounds for the whole campaign, often multiple hundred times per mission, is excruciating, and paired with the less than spectacular soundtrack makes me want to play the game without sound if it wasn't for the legacy it created. Enjoying the video so far?
Zun zun.
That like button to let YouTube know this video is worth showing to more people. Thanks. Many people associate the 90s with a boom in real-time strategy games, but did you know Warcraft was what created that boom? When Dune 2 came out, it established the basic format of pretty much any modern RTS game to this day and was extremely successful for a game in the budding genre, but that also meant no one was willing to risk taking on this landmark title. In comes Blizzard, a company mostly known for a few smaller titles and ports back then, taking the plunge on challenging Westwood, the developer of Dune and the later to come Command & Conquer series, on their home turf without ever having developed an RTS game before. Against all odds, Warcraft turned out to be a critical and financial success that would lead not only said RTS boom in the coming years, but also shape their company into what it is today. But what exactly made Warcraft so successful in the first place? Well, apart from the less serious take on the genre and it being the first fantasy RTS, Blizzard also took some liberties with the gameplay. Whereas most real-time strategy games at the time focused on large-scale battles with units constantly dying and armies being rebuilt, Warcraft emphasizes the management of settlements and small forces to outwit your enemy. The game features 2 campaigns, the Humans and Orcs, that each offer 12 missions to play through in single-player mode, with all of them having unique maps and objectives to successfully clear them. Typically, your goal will just be to obliterate the enemy units, but there are some interesting variations like fighting with a predetermined army with no reinforcements, or killing and even saving specific characters. From today's point of view, the missions are very samey and not overly exciting, but this was a novel concept when the game came out and played a large factor in Warcraft's success. What really sold the game to players, however, was the multiplayer. Warcraft wasn't the first RTS game to offer multiplayer, but the first that did it in an accessible way. You could play against your friends through dial-up modem and local networks, which widened the potential audience for this kind of competition a fair bit, and made Warcraft into a longevity powerhouse, never getting boring due to random maps and the 2 different factions resulting in ever-changing strategies. Just there really isn't all that much strategy to be found here. The basic gameplay loop has you use your worker units to collect gold and wood from the surrounding areas to build structures like barracks, mage towers, and farms, with the first few minutes of every match being the exact same in not only every story mission but also multiplayer game. This gets boring pretty quickly. Once you've got your base up to snuff, you start building some offensive units to either protect your workers or try to take on your enemy on their turf. The problem with all of this is that most of the units for both sides are functionally identical, with only a different sprite and name, and the very few unique soldiers you can build being locked behind expensive structures that take a decent time into each round to even get up. This whole sequence is pretty much a staple in every match, and the game doesn't really offer enough variety to make matches engaging or strategical. What it offers, however, is clunkiness, and a damn lot of it. First of all, there are no context-sensitive controls in this game. Everything you do is done by either clicking the appropriate interface button with your mouse or using the assigned hotkeys. I don't really mind having to select units and buildings manually, but at least let me move them or attack by clicking on an empty space or the enemy without having to manually choose the mode each time. It's never explained, but you can select multiple units at once by drawing a selection with your mouse while holding the control button. The only problem is that you can only have 4 units selected at once. Even in Warcraft, 4 units is not nearly enough firepower to break through an enemy's defenses, and having to constantly give those already clunky orders to your army multiple times because it arbitrarily gets split in quartets is annoying and makes the game a chore to play when you build a larger army. Attacking in general just doesn't feel that great in this game. Even if you use the attack command, your soldiers will take their sweet time to actually attack an enemy, and you can count yourself lucky if even half of your forces decide to take part in any given skirmish at all. The AI also doesn't really make this any easier on you. Well, if you can even call this an AI. Each unit is specifically coded to react to certain things in their immediate vicinity. For example, if an enemy soldier comes even somewhat close to one of your workers, they will start following them around like a stalker that thinks restraining orders are just a general behavioral guideline and would rather get struck down by your army while running after the fleeing peon instead of giving up the pursuit and at least getting some damage in on your units. What I want to clarify with this is that the AI is dumb. It also never reacts to any outside factors, so each time you load up a story mission, if you do the exact same thing, it will play out exactly the same way, because the enemy never changes anything. You'd think this means that the game is pretty easy, but this is just what Blizzard wants you to think. This game is hard, unfair even, with enemy ambushes being placed in the most obscure corners of the map to make sure you can never find them before they conveniently raid your town while you're going on the offensive. Add to that the fact that in almost any mission, the enemy starts out with way more troops, buildings, and resources than you, and you have yourself a fun time. Most of the missions aren't won by being a strategical genius, but by learning the enemy timings and spawns on each mission by heart through trial and error. Another thing that really grinds my gears is the pathfinding in this game. You can give a single unit the order to move to a specific place between other units, and they will still manage to mess that up from time to time by either getting stuck on a wall or another unit of yours. This often results in your ranged units somehow ending up on the front lines and vice versa, and is only solvable by micromanaging all of your troops at a snail's pace to make sure they never break ranks because they physically can't. Great fun. The first Warcraft game really doesn't hold up too well nowadays. It's slow, unresponsive, and cumbersome to play while not offering enough interesting narrative or gameplay variations to justify fighting through the slog. When the game flows, however, it is decently enjoyable. For such an early game in the genre, the selection of units is respectable, and you can find an answer to anything the game throws at you between soldiers, mages, archers, catapults, and more. Overwhelming your opponents with a well-forged army of Orcs or Humans can certainly be satisfying, and the legendary art style and humor will pull you in for at least a little bit, but you will likely be a lot better off just playing the newer entries in the series. After completing Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, we had 13 hours and 37 minutes of total playtime, 2 campaigns finished with 12 levels each, 282 brave Orcs and Humans lost in battle, 74,100 gold collected. Uncountable herd. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and remember to always keep that backlog rolling.